everyone, Michelle here, personal trainer and lifestyle coach. Today on the Because You're Incredible podcast, we have an awesome guest with me, Maria Wisman. She has a lot of experience in the cheer world, but she is also a physical therapist, personal trainer, a strength and conditioning coach, and an adaptive and inclusive trainer. So she's got a lot under her belt. I'm super excited to learn a little bit more about her from her today. And thank you so much for joining us today, Maria.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. So tell me a little bit about your experience. You obviously have a lot of titles. So how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with my cheer background. So it all started with I cheered at Ohio State from 2016 to 2020. And then I also was on the USA co-ed cheer team in 2018 and 2019. Competed at ICU Worlds a couple of times with them and traveled to FISU in Poland with Team USA. Since then, I graduated physical therapy school in May of this year, so recently. And now I am mostly a physical therapist and certified strength and conditioning specialist for cheerleaders and cheer teams. And I help them recover from injury, prevent injury, or just use strength and conditioning to help take them to the next level as an athlete or as a team. So I have my doctorate in physical therapy. I got my CSCS last summer when I started training kind of on the side in physical therapy school. I got my adaptive and inclusive trainer certification also last summer as I was personal training on the side while I was in school. So I got a couple of certifications as I was a student, and now I'm excited to be offering physical therapy to cheerleaders as well.
Awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more about cheer specifically because that's definitely something that's missing, I think, in our sport. And you're definitely going to be able to provide a lot of information to a lot of people. So I'm super excited about that. So let's talk through each of these different titles that you kind of have. So you said you have your doctorate in physical therapy. What did you major in your undergraduate?
Yeah, so actually in undergrad, I was a business finance major. So I didn't know what I wanted to do going into college. So I just picked a generic major. My dad was in business finance. I thought it's never a bad idea to learn about money and how it works, business in general. So I actually decided my sophomore year of undergrad that I wanted to go the physical therapy route. I just no longer saw myself doing a desk job. I was always really interested in strength and conditioning and recovery. And as an athlete, I was always surrounded around trainers. So it just made more sense for me to go to physical therapy route, but I also already had all of the business finance classes under my belt. So I just finished out the degree in business finance and took all the prerequisites to get into physical therapy school.
So did you end up going to school for more than 4 years for the undergraduate, or were you able to complete that all in the 4 years?
No, I was able to complete it in 4 years. So yeah, got pretty lucky, got it done in 4 years, and then just another 3 years of PT school after then.
Wow, that's impressive. So do you feel like doing the prereqs in the undergrad helped prepare you for physical therapy school?
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of worked out because I took a lot of my prereqs my last 2 years in undergrad when a lot of my classmates took them their freshman, sophomore year because they knew the whole time they were going into physical therapy. So even though I didn't have a degree in health sciences, I took all of the necessary classes like the last 2 years leading up to PT school. So I felt like it prepared me very well doing it that way.
A little fresher, right?
Yeah, it was a little closer in my brain.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And so then you went to school as a physical therapist. Obviously, there are a lot of different routes that you could have gone in the health sciences. What particularly brought you into physical therapy as your interest?
Yeah, so physical therapy, I was always surrounded, like I said, with athletic trainers and therapists, as a collegiate level athlete myself. So I'd always been around that environment and so, like saw what they did, and I loved the recovery side of things, but I also loved the prevention side of things and working with athletes to help them learn how they can prevent future injuries and also recover faster. So I just wanted to be a little bit more hands-on. I wanted to use exercise as a tool to teach other people how to get stronger, but also prevent injury and then recover from injury. So that's really what drew me in for physical therapy, having that one-on-one connection with people. And in my case now, mostly athletes, working with them to help them succeed in their athletic career, but also just stay healthy in general.
Awesome. I love that. And you don't see physical therapy a lot from a prevention standpoint, right? So you have a really
Yeah.
unique opportunity to be able to use that. I feel like it's mostly like people get injured and then they go to PT, right?
Yeah. So that's part of the reason why I started my own practice. So I have my own practice called the Cheer Doctor. It's technically a physical therapy practice, but I do a lot of strength and conditioning, sports performance, personal training type of things under that umbrella as well. But that's why I started my business right out of PT school, because I knew I didn't want to work for a clinic because it would be a lot more of only seeing people after they're injured and only seeing them for a short amount of time and only doing what insurance told me that I could do. So by starting my own practice, I am now able to focus on prevention a little bit more. I'm able to see people how I want to see them without having to listen to insurance telling me what to do. So I felt like I was able to give a lot better care this way. And I'm super fortunate to be able to have the reach to be able to go out on my own and kind of do things my own way.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, cool. So physical therapy, personal trainer. Tell me a little bit about like some of the population you worked with. What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So for physical therapy, I mean, I specialize in cheerleaders. The business is called the Cheer Doctor. So I see a lot, I would say I see mostly high school cheerleaders. So high school cheerleaders that are serious about the sport, motivated, and wanting to cheer in college. That's my biggest demographic that I work with in person, especially. But on the physical therapy side of things, yes, I see a lot of injured cheerleaders, but I also see general population, people from ages 15 to 70 just looking to get stronger or recover from injury or improve their health and improve their life. So physical therapy, I see a wide variety of people. For the sports performance, personal training type of things, it's really only cheerleaders. It's those high school cheerleaders that are motivated, some college level cheerleaders. I get occasionally some younger middle school cheerleaders in there. So yeah, the physical therapy, I get a little bit of a broader reach. The sports performance training side of things is a little bit more cheer specific, cheer focused.
Very cool. Okay. And then the last one, this one I haven't heard of until you had mentioned it, is the adaptive and inclusive trainer. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So the adaptive and inclusive trainer is something I was really interested in last summer when I was doing a physical therapy rotation in a skilled nursing facility. So I saw a lot of individuals that had different disabilities, whether it was like a spinal cord injury or amputations or some type of neurological injury. And I really enjoyed teaching them how to stay healthy and stay fit within their given abilities. And a big thing for me was making sure that they're not afraid to go into a gym, to go into a weight room, and to modify the lifts so that it works for them. And I think that's something that's similar with the neurological population I work with, but also the cheerleaders, is that both of those groups are sometimes misunderstood or afraid of using a gym or a weight room. For adaptive individuals, it's because they don't look the same lifting as other people. So they're afraid that people are going to critique their form or think that they look funny doing something. And then for cheerleaders, it's kind of the same thing. They're not used to being in the weight room. A lot of the high school female athletes that I work with are afraid to go into their school weight room because it's mostly all the football players and the bigger guys. So both of those populations were afraid to go into the weight room, and I really enjoy teaching them how to be a little bit more comfortable going into a gym and learning how to stay in shape, stay healthy, and not be afraid to, go out there and do it for themselves too.
That's awesome. So this kind of leads us to the question that I wanted to ask you about your name of your business. So originally it was called Everyone Should Lift, and now it's the Cheer Doctor. So this kind of speaks to what you were just saying, right? Tell me a little bit more about that concept behind Everyone Should Lift.
Yeah, so everyone should lift came from just my belief that truly everybody should lift. I think a lot of people are sometimes afraid of the weight room. They think they're going to get hurt or they think it's not for them. Um, for cheerleaders, sometimes for flyers, they think it's going to make them bigger and bulkier, so they avoid the weight room. And I really want to wanted to make a statement like, no, just because you're a flyer doesn't mean that you shouldn't lift weights. Like there's still a purpose to lifting heavy weights. It's not going to make you bigger and bulkier. And just because you have an injury or a disability, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't lift either. It might just look different. And so getting people to understand that weightlifting isn't this big scary thing. It's going to be something that helps with longevity, just having stronger bones and joints. I also came up with this name while I was working in the skilled nursing facility, and I just saw so many older individuals that hadn't been weightlifting and how that affects them as they get sick and are in the hospital, and how if you can start to teach them to incorporate weight training or just strength training, how they can get better so much faster and leave the skilled nursing facility faster so they can get home to their families. So I was just so passionate. I still am very passionate about that statement, everyone should lift, because it's so important just for longevity as a whole. It's not just for athletes, it's for people who want to have strong bones and be able to go up and down the stairs, get up off of the ground when they're older, and not, worry about falling and breaking a bone and being in the hospital. So I'm still super passionate about everyone should lift. I changed the name to the cheer doctor because it just made more sense for my niche. I work mostly with cheerleaders. So now I am the cheer doctor who still believes that everyone should lift.
I love it. So can you kind of talk us through maybe a theoretical journey with somebody who isn't comfortable weightlifting or strength training, and kind of how you get them more comfortable with the idea?
Yeah. So usually, I guess I'll take you through a first appointment would look like. So, the first appointment with me, I do, whether it's physical therapy or sports performance related, I do a general movement screen. So it looks different for both sides of that, but I'll go the sports performance route. So I'll do a movement screen to see what their mobility looks like. So I'll do a shoulder mobility assessment. I'll do an assessment for their hips. I'll look at their squat. I'll look at different movements to see where I feel like they're to see what areas I feel like we could really work on to show them where they're already doing well and to create a plan going forward. So that way they see that, there are things that you're already good at. Like I want to give them that boost of confidence and that, these are the things that you did very well on with these tests that I gave you. Here are some different areas that I saw that could use a little bit of improvement. And then here's the plan going forward. And then usually in that first appointment, I give them a couple of exercises that are done in the gym setting. I work out of a gym. So those two exercises are usually using some sort of weight or box or step, some type of equipment in the gym. So it's getting them used to being in that area. But I'll also modify it so that they can do exercises at home if they want to start in a familiar setting. So I introduce them to the concept, show them the plan, show them how passionate I am about strength training and weightlifting. But then I also modify it to them if they would like to start at home and then progress towards, getting into a gym and getting into the bigger weightlifting movements. And I would say a lot of them like to do things at home, but they get excited about coming into the gym once a week with me or every so often so that we can do a lift where they're learning new skills. So a lot of them get excited about learning those new skills in the weight room, even if they're doing a lot of their program at home. So it's fun to see them progress that way.
Okay, very cool. Now, obviously, you have a lot of different aspects that you're doing in terms of the physical therapy side, the training side, all of that. What does a typical week look like for you? Are you always at your gym? Do you travel to locations?
Yeah, so a typical week is like kind of all over the place for me because I do different things. So, like for example, on Sundays I run a cheerlifting class out of my gym in Westerville, and then I'll travel to a cheer team and I'll run a workout in their weight room. During the week, I will there might be some days where I'm traveling to cheer gyms to talk or run a workout or run a workshop. I offer free injury screens and free workshops to cheer gyms. So I might be doing that some days of the week. I'll typically see patients in the gym in person 4 days a week. And then the other time is me at home on my computer programming, working on business stuff, or reaching out to cheer teams to plan things in the future. So I have a little bit of a mix of traveling to teams, being in person in my gym, and then programming online and working from home. So I like having that mix of being able to see different areas.
I don't know if it's an athlete thing, but just doing so many different things seems like super common for most athletes, right?
Yeah.
We're all over the place. All right, very cool. So you said that you have your location. You do a little bit of online programming. We'll talk a little bit more about the app that you have as well. And then are there, like, I know you're not meant to have a favorite, but is there something that you like to do the most out of all of those things?
Ooh, I mean, I love physical therapy. I mean, that's what I went to school for. So I love seeing my patients one-on-one in person, working on getting them back to where they want to be and better. So I love my physical therapy one-on-one appointments. I feel like it's the time when I can relate to whoever I'm working with the best. As much as I love my group classes, there's nothing like working with someone one-on-one and really getting to the bottom of what the problem is and helping them overcome it.
Okay, definitely. Awesome. So when it comes to, let's talk a little bit more about like the strength and conditioning piece. So when it comes to strength and conditioning lifting, there is a little bit of a negative stigma for younger athletes, right? And you did mention that you work with some high school athletes. So how do you feel about and what's your experience with training younger athletes?
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a myth that I think there is a myth going around that weightlifting will stunt people's growth. So I ran into that where some parents are afraid to have their kids weightlifting, but I just try to show them the research that, weightlifting doesn't actually, it hasn't been proven at least to stunt growth. Especially for kids that are in gymnastics and cheerleading and are tumbling all the time, that's putting up to 12 to 15 times their body weight on their joints and bones already. So if you're having your athlete pounding and tumbling, then there's no additional danger to having them weightlifting. What you want to do is just slowly progress them. So the first day I see a middle school client, I'm not having them do power cleans and thrusters and lifting a bunch of heavy barbell weight over their head. I'm just testing their body weight squat. I'm seeing what like a step down looks like. I might introduce some dumbbell movements so that they can get used to weightlifting and see that it's not something to be scared of. But we start slow and then gradually build up to the heavier barbell movements. But really the sky's the limit. I mean, you can see these like 10-year-old Olympic weightlifters lifting heavier weight than I ever could, or that some stronger men even could. So really the sky's the limit. It's all just about like meeting the athlete where they're at. What's their experience level? If they've never lifted before, it doesn't matter if they're 10 or 20. I'm still going to start them out real light and progress them from there.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So then when it comes to, we'll talk a little bit more about cheer specifically. What do you think are some of the benefits about including, strength and conditioning and PT in a sport like cheer?
Yeah. So I think that the strength component is something that is often left out of cheerleading. That was another reason why I named the business Everyone Should Lift, because I felt like cheerleaders were getting a lot of conditioning in. Coaches were getting really good at having their cheerleaders condition, but we were still missing the strength component. Strength training and weightlifting is not really normalized in the sport of cheerleading. And it's so important. After going to physical therapy school, I just realized how important it is for injury prevention and how getting stronger can help with body control for flyers in the air. And it can help with power development and tumbling. And of course, bases with explosiveness in their stunts, but also just for sideline cheerleaders, having sharper motions. The more muscle you have, the more body awareness that you have, the better mind muscle connection you have from weightlifting and strength training, from doing those movements consistently. It's going to translate into having sharper motions, having better body awareness in the air, having stronger tumbling, being a stronger base. So I was really passionate about trying to focus on the strength training component of things and getting cheerleaders and cheer coaches to recognize that strength training is just as important as the conditioning that they're doing, and making sure that they're focusing on doing that as well.
Okay. And why do you think, if you just had to make an opinion, I guess, why do you think that strength piece is missing from so many programs?
Yeah, I think There's a lot of reasons. So I would say one for flyers, it's kind of like that fear of getting bigger and bulkier. They don't want to weight lift. They think, oh, my bases should weight lift because they're lifting me in the air, but I'm not lifting anyone, so I don't need to lift weights. It's just not true because one, it's not going to make you bigger and bulkier. And two, you still need to be strong. Even though you're not lifting other people up, you need to have body awareness and body control, and it'll help with other things. So that's one of those myths. The other thing is that cheerleaders and cheer teams are just often under supported, under resourced. A lot of them don't have access to a weight room or don't have access to strength and conditioning coaches. So it's really hard for them to get into a weight room and to get those services. Cheer coaches are meant to be an expert at coaching cheer. They're not meant to be an expert at developing strength and conditioning programs, and they just don't have the resources to do it sometimes. So those are really the biggest reasons I see. The other thing is, for cheer specifically, when we have time to get everybody together for a practice, those practices need to be focused on, like, if you're, especially if you're building stunts as a team, stunts and pyramids, because those are things that you can't do unless you have everybody together at one time. So I had a lot of coaches saying, we can't schedule any more practice time than what we're already doing. And when we do have practices, we need to work on those stunts and pyramids because it's the only time we can get everyone together at the same time. So yeah, just the time, resources, support, and some of those myths, I think, is why cheerleading and cheer teams haven't gotten into the weight room as frequently as other sports have.
Got you. And do you have a rebuttal for that last one, just in terms of the time aspect?
So my rebuttal for that is, well, I guess this kind of leads into my strength and conditioning app, because I realize that that's a problem, and I know that I agree that when you are in practice together, it's super important to be doing those pyramid stunts, things that you need everybody there for. I guess my rebuttal would be that strength training is going to help with those pyramids and stunts also. But I sympathize with the coaches that are like, we need this time to work on pyramids and stunts. So I created this strength and conditioning app so that they could have a little bit more flexibility and give their cheerleaders access to the app for them to do on their own time, so that they're getting stronger and working on those things on their own. And then when they're in practice as a team, that's when they're working on building those stunts and pyramids and things that they have to do together as a team.
Okay. And if you were to set, let's say, an ideal schedule for an athlete, and let's say they have practice, because obviously every program is different, but like 3 times a week, do you suggest that they lift day of, days off, right after, right before? What do you usually suggest?
Ooh, ideal. I guess an ideal world, if they lifted or if they practiced 3 times a week, I would have them lifting 2 to 3 days on the days that they're not practicing. So it's like every other day be practice, lift, practice, lift, practice, lift. But I would say that it's less important that you do it on certain days and at certain times, and more important that you just get it done. So I remember at OSU, I think we lifted in the morning and then practiced later that night. We lifted 2 to 3 times a week, year round, every week, and then we practiced, I think, 4 or 5 times a week. So there were definitely days where we were practicing in the morning and then, or lifting in the morning and then practicing later on that day. So it's not bad to do them both in the same day. It's just making sure that you can be structured and consistent with what you're doing, and whatever schedule that you come up with, making sure it's something that is going to get done. The best program is the program that gets done, just the one that people will do.
Amen. Okay, absolutely. That's a perfectly reasonable response, and I love that. So then the next piece is recovery, right? We obviously know that that's really important, kind of that prehab type of idea, prevention. So where do you fit recovery in? Is that a part of the workouts? Is that a substitute for workouts? What does that typically look like?
Mm-hmm. So recovery, I like to think of like just making sure that the athlete isn't overdoing it. So I work with a lot of athletes that are very motivated and they'll do everything that I tell them to do. So I need to, when I'm working with someone one-on-one, I need to kind of gauge their mindset and how motivated they are. And sometimes I need to reel them back in. So when they get closer to their biggest or their busier competition season, we're not lifting super heavy 3 times a week anymore. We're doing more preventative exercises. Like for my bases, we might be doing small accessory rotator cuff preventative exercises. For my flyers, we might be focusing a little bit more on hip stability and accessory lifts that way. So the recovery is just the backing off of the high number of reps during a busy competition season and focusing more on specific body part prevention type of exercises. And then also making sure they're getting enough sleep, of course, enough water, looking at their nutrition, making sure they're getting some rest outside of practices and managing their schoolwork. So it's not all about the exercise and stretching and, doing all of that. It's just as important that they're focusing on what they're doing outside of practice and how they're able to rest.
Awesome. Sounds very well rounded. I love that. All right, so then let's talk a little bit more specific movements. What do you think kind of directly translates to cheerleaders, and what are some movements that they should be doing pretty consistently?
Yeah, so it's a kind of a loaded question. So movements that people should be doing consistently. I would just start with the basic squat, hinge, push, pull, core, carry. I mean, all of those are going to translate very well into different movements that we do in cheer routines. I will say that there are some lifts that we do in CrossFit. So I take a lot of CrossFit classes. So I like to relate some of the CrossFit lifts that we do to cheerleading because they relate very well. There's a gymnastics portion to CrossFit, but it also feels very, very cheer routine like to me. So thrusters, so squatting and lifting a weight overhead is going to be very similar to kind of the movements that bases have to do under their flyers. I like to do a lot of overhead holds for both flyers and bases. So for an example, like a plate overhead walking lunge is going to be great for bases to learn a little bit more about their shoulder stability, their core stability while using their legs at the same time. For flyers, they might not lift people over their head, but it's still a great tool to help them learn about their core and shoulder stability and generate that single leg strength that they need. So I incorporate a lot of CrossFit movements that I see are mimicked in cheerleading and do a lot of those kind of overhead stability exercises. Something I really like doing that I think is very cheer routine specific is I'll do a 3-minute AMRAP. So for people that don't know what an AMRAP is, it's just as many rounds as possible. So I'll try to pick exercises that mimic their cheer routine. So an example might be box jumps, handstand walks, push-ups, squats, sprints. You can think of a million different things that might mimic a cheer routine, but I'll pick 3 to 4 of those exercises. I'll give them I'll say do 6 box jumps, 10 push-ups, 10 squats. That's just an example. And do as many rounds of that as you can in 3 minutes. Take a 2-minute break and then do it again. So that way they're building routine endurance and very specifically adapting to the high intensity of a cheer routine without having to have a routine ready to go or without the danger of dropping each other. So it's an easy way to kind of mimic a cheer routine without the danger of it.
Absolutely. I love that. And we're a really weird, unique sport like that because it's like all out for 2.5 minutes type of thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, definitely. So when it comes to like you just mentioned a few different movements that you really like incorporating. You mentioned CrossFit. I've had a couple of conversations with people about how even like Olympic weightlifting, so like snatches, cleans, and stuff like that, right? Super applicable. So when it comes to those types of movements, are you changing it up per person? Do you kind of have some programs put together? I know you said you mentioned do your app.
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned the Olympic weightlifting because I've seen that a lot. Like retired cheerleaders go on to become Olympic weightlifters, or I also know Olympic weightlifters that have gone on to be cheerleaders. So that's also another like huge correlation. But so for my app, I have different programs. I make it individualized to where the athlete is at by giving flyer versus bases options. So I have flyer, basis options, and then within those 2 options, I also have body weight, basic, intermediate, and advanced levels. So whether you're a flyer who is wanting to do exercises at home and is maybe just starting out, there's a flyer body weight option for you. Maybe you're a base in college and you want to be doing power cleans, Olympic lifting, heavier barbell movements, then you can do the base advanced option. So it can be individualized based on where the athlete is at. The other thing that I do with the app, so right now I am really just selling the app to cheer teams specifically because I want to get so many more teams strength training and in the weight room. So I also customize their program based on where the team needs to be as a whole. So I always ask the teams I'm working with, when is your biggest competition? Like, when do you guys want to peak? So if I was talking to Ohio State, it would be UCA Nationals in January, usually like January, mid-January, January 12th to 14th, I think is what it usually is. So I would put them into my programming calendar based on that date. So in the summer, they would be doing more intense conditioning, higher reps, lower weight, kind of building just general fitness. And then it would start to move more towards building strength and then more towards building power. And then as they reach closer to that November, December, January months, it's more so focused on maintenance and injury prevention. So they're not doing a whole lot of reps anymore where they're going to get injured. They're more so focusing on those accessory lifts that are going to help prevent injury while they want to stay healthy in their biggest competition season. So the app is meant to be done year round so that it brings structure and consistency into the strength and conditioning program. So it's meant to be year round. It's meant to be, they're meant to use me kind of as their digital strength and conditioning coach. So I saw that a lot of cheer teams don't have access to a strength and conditioning coach. So I was trying to think of what is the best way that I can reach the most teams, make it individualized to the athlete, specific to the team, and be their digital strength and conditioning coach so that they can get access to the same types of resources that these other big cheer gyms are getting access, big cheer teams are getting access to because they're under athletics at their school or because they just have more resources than other teams. So I was super excited about being able to offer those kind of different options.
Very cool. Awesome. I did have one more question. I just thought of it again. So one more thing about just movements is, do you tend to prefer like sport specific movements or right, movements that are actually the opposite of what you normally do for injury prevention? That might be a PT question.
Yeah. So I guess I would say a mix. Of too much of one thing is a bad thing. So we don't want repetitive overuse injuries by just constantly doing routines, routine conditioning, and not having any other sort of supplement to that. So while I like to do sports specific movement, I also want to supplement it with things that are not sports specific and more joint specific. So like strengthening the rotator cuffs in a way that maybe isn't used quite as often in cheerleading so that we can prevent those overuse injuries that we see in cheerleading. So I guess a mix of the two would be my answer to your question.
Yeah, that's also completely valid. Okay, very cool. So have you already seen some progress and or results from working with some of these cheer teams and or athletes?
Yes. So I will talk about 2 teams that used my programming last year. So I started doing this online programming thing last year, a little bit more than a year ago, I guess now. But I worked with the University of Toledo and a high school near me called Westerville North. Both teams had their best year in program history. Toledo got top 10 at nationals for the first time, and then Westerville North made it to nationals for the first time and placed top 3 at states. So I was really excited about that. I mean, both of them, they didn't have a structured strength training program in place before they started working with me. And I think that they just, they started taking their strength training seriously and it really paid off. Some of the other individual athletes that I work with, I've had their tumbling coaches tell me that their tumbling looks so much stronger ever since they started weightlifting. I've had some girls commit to the high state cheer team. So I've seen a lot of progress with the girls, especially the ones that have never done any sort of thing like this before, and they start seeing that kind of light bulb go off in their head of seeing how transformative strength and conditioning can be to developing yourself as an athlete and a cheerleader. So it's been fun. It's been fun to see that.
Okay, cool. So if you had it your way, ideal, you get all of these different cheer teams. What is the next couple of years looking like for you? What do you plan to do?
Ooh, so I would love to be the strength and conditioning coach for multiple cheer teams across the country using my app, using the app for programming. And then I also have so right now I use an app for programming and then a band group where I connect with the teams that I'm working with, offer advice, challenges, competitions. It's a way for us to communicate a little bit more. I would love to combine those two into my own personalized app where I'm working with lots of cheer teams across the country online. And then for the in-person side of things, I still want to be doing the physical therapy in person, maybe with my own space with a little bit more reach. So I guess 2 years from now, I'm doing the same things, just on a bigger scale, and reaching more people.
Awesome. That's so cool. All right. So I will go ahead and include your contact information below. You did mention a couple of, or at least one resource in particular that you thought that people would benefit from, the Cheer Coaching Academy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the Cheer Coaching Academy, I did a podcast with them a month ago or so, a few weeks ago. And they're a great resource for cheer coaches. They give a lot of information about not only strength and conditioning, but like how to be a better coach and how to work on stunts and things like that. So I just thought that that was a great additional resource to have for a lot of cheer coaches. Other than that, though, they can go to my website or look up some of I have different programs on my website that they can look at as well. I have a free ebook on strength and conditioning, and then I have a free movement screen for cheerleaders. So those two resources would be another good option for coaches looking to improve on their strength and conditioning and injury prevention for cheerleaders.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before you head out?
I don't think so. I feel like we covered pretty much everything that I was hoping to cover. Thank you for having me on the podcast. And yeah.
Of course. All right, cool. Thank you so much. I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.